welcome to Leading in the Dark. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks, Nick.
So, you're the Chief Executive Officer of the Impact Group. Tell me what the Impact Group is and the career path that led you to become the CEO.
Impact Group is a global career and leadership development company. So we work with mid-size and larger corporations where we are working with them on their human capital strategy. And then in the end, we actually work with the individuals within the organizations to help them take their careers to the next level, executive coaching, leadership development. And then we also support people with career transition support. So helping people find new jobs, maybe when they're leaving an organization due to a restructuring or something like along those lines. So anything around careers, career development, helping you get to the next level, that's what we focus on.
You've been there quite a long time, it looks like.
Yeah, I actually have just been getting a bunch of LinkedIn congratulations because I'm hitting my anniversary, my 24th anniversary this month. And so Impact Group is a family business. My mom started it. So we're second generation women owned. And we have transformed over the years. She actually started the business originally out of her psychology practice. So she was a psychologist working with people in the early days of EAP and EAP meaning employee assistance programs. And when people would go into a situation where they had some sort of a personal or maybe professional, maybe family situation where they needed some counseling, she would get the referral. And the interesting story is a lot of times when she would peel back the layers of the onion of the trauma that they were going through at the time, a lot of times they actually found that the impetus of some of these issues was a corporate relocation, especially for executives and executive families. And she, as a young child, went through a relatively traumatic relocation. And so she was able to put that professional experience through her personal lens and decided to start the company supporting families through the personal transition of a corporate sponsored move. And it was back in the 80s when women were just getting a little bit more attention for coming back into the workplace in more professional roles. And all of a sudden, wives were saying, no, I don't want to move because my job matters too. And so that's how we got into the career transition work was actually through this unique niche supporting what they used to call trailing spouses. Now we call them accompanying partners or accompanying spouses. I admire my mom so much because she had a vision for really inventing an entirely new industry of supporting people through career transition in this niche of relocation. And then over the years, we've transformed into many other things. I joined the company in 2001, and it was never my intention, honestly, to join the family business. But I started helping out when I came back to St. Louis a couple years after college, and then I was in a career pause myself, and I was looking for something new. And she told me that my mom had just been diagnosed with cancer. And so it was actually in that inflection point where I said, you know what? I don't need to focus so hard on finding my next job somewhere else outside of St. Louis, where I was born and raised. Let me just focus on family right now. And I temporarily started helping out at Impact Group, and a little bit of the rest is history.
Tell me more about this relocation trauma. It's just not something I've heard about or been exposed to. I mean, I could guess at some of the issues that might arise from these corporate sponsored relocations, but what is going on for these individuals that is causing them to seek professional help?
So let me be clear, not every family that is relocating is certainly not going to go through trauma, but it is actually a very chaotic time. In the case of a corporate sponsored relocation, we're managing a new career for the employee. If there's a family, oftentimes there may be a job search involved for a spouse. At the same time, if you've got a broader family, there's getting kids in new schools, there's new doctors, there's daycares, there's everything that goes along with recreating a life. So while it might feel like just business to the company who's making someone an offer for a new job, or a promotion to the rest of the family, there is a lot going on in a relatively condensed period of time. And so a lot of people just roll with the punches and are able to move through it. And others might, due to circumstances or personality or whatever the case is, they might go into what, I was referring to as trauma, where they're seeking professional help. Now, our goal with what we do at Impact Group is we work to keep people from getting to a point where they are experiencing trauma. How can we be proactive to support them with a little bit of personal and professional coaching through the process? So, what Impact Group services do to support people with the goal of the employee is going to be more productive in their new role. They're going to be more likely to be a long term retained employee. They're going to be more engaged and excited about starting their new role because their family isn't all stressed out. Or in the case of maybe a single employee, they're not having to juggle all this stuff on their own. So, what we do is we'll help with the spouse job search. So, our career coaches help people, not necessarily placing them in new roles, but we're going to help them learn how they can be the most productive and efficient and results oriented job seeker they can be, especially when you're job seeking in a location where you generally don't have a network. And so that in itself adds another layer of stress and anxiety to people in a job search where maybe nowadays you are looking for two incomes to make ends meet. Or, especially with younger generations where both jobs are legit professional jobs, not where you have the doctor marrying the nurse. Now the doctor's marrying the doctor, so to speak. So there's the job search piece. There's also just all the things that take up time. And, when you're trying to sell your house and trying to move and, get a mortgage and all these other things, there's a lot of pulls on your time. We can help take some of that off by helping people find doctors and daycares and things like that in the new location. And a lot of times, when people are moving and the spouse is kind of feeling like they're just, quote, trailing along, like they used to be called, then the question, especially on like an international move, might be something like, how am I going to make this move about me as well? And and how are we going to recreate our life in a way that we're building good routines for our family and so that we're supporting the kids when they're going through their emotional ups and downs. And so it's natural to have ups and downs, but in the case of relocation, how can we make those ups and downs as kind of concise and shallow as possible and get you into more of kind of an even keel comfort level going forward?
So this service you described is what these companies are hiring you to provide for their employees?
Yeah. So, as part of a relocation benefit, a lot of times people will get services where they're introduced to a realtor. They'll get their household goods shipment paid for or money towards that. And so, the other thing they do is offer services really just to help the family feel at home again as quickly as possible because the company knows that by making that employee stickier, so to speak, then they're more likely to have a long term employee and a productive employee. And we've seen that ourselves, even with our own employees at Impact Group, where we've brought in key executives. And if there are kid issues that are pulling on their energy, then how do we make sure that they feel like their families is taken care of as possible during that time frame?
And how many employees do you have at Impact?
We've got about 250 team members globally now.
That's a pretty big company.
Well, so we are supporting global and Fortune 500 companies, whether it's with helping them relocate their staff all around the world, helping develop executives in 6 continents, There's been a lot of companies, as you hear in the news, that are, just changing their workforce, and they might have too many people in one department, not enough in another department. And so we've been pretty busy with helping with organizations as they go through some of that workforce transformation as well. So supporting people transition into new careers with other companies also. So yeah, we're very blessed that we get to work with really exciting companies going through lots of transformation and do so on a global basis.
Well, Lauren, I mean, that scale of success is, especially for self-started businesses, family businesses, is not common. And you've been there for maybe very close to the beginning, but talk me through that incredible growth that you experienced. How did you achieve that?
Yeah, well, so my mom founded the company in 1988. And then she started in that little niche of relocation. And then in the 90s, she started taking that offering of career support that we do in the relocation space into the industry called outplacement, which is helping people have a soft landing after they've been laid off. So a lot of times it can be included in someone's severance package or things like that. And so we started doing outplacement in the 90s. And that timing was good because when I joined the company in 2001, it was right in that downturn of the dot-com bust. So, we have what we call, countercyclical businesses. As organizations are growing, they're moving and relocating and hiring people. And as challenges in the economy happen, then we help with the other side of things on the outplacement. So as one part would go up, the other would go down. And then in the 2000s, we actually started some acquisitions. And so we acquired another company that did outplacement and grew that part of the business actually right in time for the Great Recession. And so that timing was pretty insightful. My mom was still leading the business at that time, and she bought a business that was they really just wanted to. It was a public company. They wanted to offload this part of their business. And I remember I had just finished my MBA, and as we were looking at the valuation of this business, she asked me, like, "What do you think we should pay for it?" And, she was still leading the organization. And I went through this whole analysis, and I'm telling you, here's the present value of future earnings and, all sorts of analysis. And she's like, and this is where her psychology background really came into play. She's like, "I know they really want to get rid of this business. They really want to sell it to us." She had like put all these pieces together. And so she was like, "We're going to offer this." And it was this incredibly lowball offer. And I'm like, "You are kidding me. That is a horrifying, embarrassingly low offer." And she's like, "That's where we're going to start." And sure enough, they took it. And it was a huge lesson for me of like sometimes the book smarts and following the rules and wanting to be seen as knowing what you're doing versus just the experience that you gain through life. And I certainly have figured that out over time. I've been leading as CEO over 15 years. And it's like, wow, the things I know now that I wish I knew 15 years ago, pretty impressive. So anyway, that's a kind of a fun story of, just again, me admiring my mom and some of her business acumen, even though she didn't really take the traditional business route. But then over the years, when I took over shortly after the Great Recession, I knew that it was going to be a hard couple of years because, we weren't in a good economy. And so how do we jumpstart and how do we become more strategic? And that's when in 2009, 10, 11, we started our leadership development practice. And so it's the third leg of our stool where we are delivering coaching. And so at our core, we are a coaching company, but this is a different kind of coaching. It's not career coaching like most of our other businesses. It is leadership coaching, executive coaching. And we are, really a strategic partner in this case with a lot of our clients. And that's how we've developed this beautiful suite of services where no matter what phase of the business cycle you're in and no matter what phase of the employee life cycle you've got team members in, we can really support you as a holistic partner to support your people strategy. And, that's where we have supported many of our mid-size and Fortune 500 clients through some of these exciting transitions over the last now almost going on almost 40 years.
So are you one of the larger companies doing these types of services?
I would say we're one of the larger, still privately held companies doing this kind of work. I would say, I think we're actually the largest women-owned career and leadership development company in this space. There are some publicly traded companies that are subsidiaries of some big staffing firms, for example, that do this work. And I would say the difference with what we do and with what they do is we are the most human of all, especially in the outplacement world. We're the most human of all these coaching providers. There's a lot of companies out there that are introducing a lot of AI into coaching. And that's not to say that we aren't using AI in certain ways, but we believe that the accountability and the relationship that's built in a coaching process is something that we don't want to replace with AI. And especially when people are going through a career transition, when you're looking for a job, it's an incredibly isolating and challenging emotional ride. And we know that the number one thing that people value through these transitions, it's not how exactly did I get my resume done? Or what exactly should I say in this interview? It's the emotional support they get from the coach. And so that's where we really differentiate ourselves is that human relationship that we have in the coaching process. And then, yes, we build AI into some technology and we build in lots of support and do it yourself kind of resources as well. But that one-on-one, in fact, we call it one-to-me coaching, is something that we feel can't be replaced.
Lauren, you mentioned your customers are Fortune 500 size. It just strikes me they would have the resources to do some of this internally through their HR department. So why do they partner with somebody externally versus doing this internally?
Great question. Number one, I would say is confidentiality. And the things that we're supporting people with are things that are very personal, whether it's managing someone's career trajectory internally and how do they talk about their hopes and dreams and fears and confidence. And how do I really step up to become the leader that I need to be? If you're having that with your HR manager, that could maybe feel like, well, what am I going to say that eventually is going to be used against me potentially? And so having that confidential third party in that leadership development conversation is really, really valuable. We also help organizations maybe that do have lots of HR resources. It's all about how do you scale the coaching throughout the organization as organizations get leaner and leaner and looking for ways to reduce headcount. Obviously HR is an area where they're looking to reduce headcount, but we also know that managers need support and individuals and also need support as they're growing through their organization. So we are a way that organizations can scale their support to their employees. And the other thing that we've done some research on, whether it's through the personal challenges that people experience through relocation, or like we were talking about earlier on leadership development, even in the more kind of open environment that companies have worked to create over the last couple decades of, come to me, it's a safe space. We know that over 40% of employees don't really want to talk to their manager about personal challenges they're having, or they don't want to talk to their HR professionals about maybe personal things going on in their life. And so, about 40% of people, even with someone they feel comfortable and close with on a professional standpoint, really don't want to talk about some of that personal stuff and get that in the way because they don't feel comfortable with how it might come across with showing some level of weakness or how it might be used down the road in some other or fear of how it might be used against, even if it really wouldn't be.
Yeah, those reasons make a lot of sense. I wonder if there's a specific example that you could talk through. You mentioned these people, they want to evolve into the leader that they think they can be or should be, and they've got some type of roadblock. Maybe it's anxiety, or they don't know what to do. They're hesitant to take the step, take some action. How do you coach people through these types of things?
Yeah, so we hear all the time just one simple, very, very simple topic in the leadership space that resonates with a lot of people, especially women, is the whole concept of, do I really belong here? And like, I am, I'm, I've been promoted into this role, but I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in these meetings and like I don't feel like I'm ready. And we hear that all the time. There was one specific example that comes to mind where a woman was invited to a large meeting with some executives, and it was a standing meeting. And there were more people invited to the meeting than could sit at the table. And she consistently would, in the standing meeting, sit in one of the chairs that are around the edge of the room, not at the table. And she, even though she was invited to this meeting, she still saw herself as an observer in this meeting. And so she was talking with her coach about the situation. And so they agreed because of having this constant voice in her head of saying, like, do I really belong here? Her coach challenged her, what would happen if you actually took a seat at the table? It's the proverbial take the seat at the table. Well, in the next meeting, she actually took the seat at the table and she showed up differently at the meeting. She was more apt to voice her opinions. And, it was just something as simple as actually sitting at the table and feeling like you've been invited to this meeting. You've earned the right to sit at the table. So do it. And it was giving herself permission to do something as simple as that, which, maybe to some of your listeners might sound a little silly, but maybe to some of your other listeners might make a lot of sense. And so that's just, one kind of example, but we hear all the time from people about like, do I really belong here? It could also be like, I'm not comfortable having difficult conversations. And, as you grow up the leadership ranks, how do you get more comfortable setting certain expectations and then having the conversations around accountability to have the direct conversation around performance? I hear all the time with our clients, oh, our managers are not good at having direct conversations. And so then people just end up tolerating mediocrity until finally it gets so bad that they get fired. Isn't the conversation that manager has to have where they're actually firing that person a lot more difficult than the uncomfortable conversation they could have had a year ago about managing their performance in a more direct way? So those are just a couple examples.
Yeah, that's a very good way to frame that, what you just said, which is more difficult, telling somebody they're underperforming or firing them. So, how do you coach people through that specifically? So, the hesitancy to have these uncomfortable conversations, other than just saying, "Hey, that's your job, go do it." Like, how do you talk people through this?
We have a couple different ways that we can do that. So, I mean, it depends on the level of the person. And so, one of the things that we're really good at Impact Group is scaling coaching. So, we actually have a coaching service that is designed for frontline leaders or middle managers that, maybe don't have access to a lot of development. And, historically, maybe people would go to a session for a couple days out of the office and go get this training, go back and you have your binder that you put on the shelf and never look at again. And so in this case, what we've decided to do is we believe the magic of coaching is transformational because it means that you're able to change behavior over time, and the approach of the traditional training is flawed in that it expects leaders to change one and done. And now I told you all these new behaviors, go implement them. And that's not how adults learn. So we have taken this new approach that we call Link Learn Coach, and we've integrated coaching with LinkedIn Learning. And so we've actually brought the magic of coaching to the masses, where for under $1,000, you can have coaching brought to your front and midline managers to have behavior change over the course of 2 months in this coaching program. So, because typically people see coaching as reserved for executives, like this is what my CEO gets or my VP who is underperforming and they need coaching in order to like shape up. But we believe that coaching is actually something that should be accessible to everyone, and it's about how you really maximize your performance. So, what do we do in this case? So, with Link Learn Coach, we actually have some learning modules with LinkedIn Learning. And then once you've kind of learned some new content, we then add some coaching and some reflection to the process. And in this case, with the example that we just talked about, it might be some questions like, why do you not address poor performance when you first notice it? Like you might actually talk about it to your peer or talk about it to your boss, but why do you not actually address it with the person? Like what's stopping you? And so open-ended questions like that put someone on the spot and you just like sit there and wait until they come up with an answer. And sometimes silence is uncomfortable, but again, that's where coaching comes in, where you're not throwing them the lifeline to say, like, oh, well, is it because of this? No, like you need to do the heavy lifting of figuring out why it is that there's a roadblock. And maybe you actually need to ask a couple series of whys. It could also be like, are there particular people that you're comfortable having the conversation with, but other people that you're not comfortable having the conversation with? And so a lot of it is like we wanna give people a little bit of content so they can come to their own conclusions, or maybe then it takes the coach to actually tease out the real gold of maybe some of the challenges in their current behavior, or maybe it's understanding, like, it could even be something I don't wanna make it sound like it's therapy, but it could be like I hated it when my mom or dad used to be critical of me, and so, like, I have a feeling about it, and I'm putting that feeling on somebody else. We're not responsible for how someone else reacts. We're only responsible for how we approach the topics, and so how can we approach these topics in productive ways with our employees?
LinkedIn Learning is pretty good, right? There's a lot of really great content there.
Have you taken any of the courses?
On LinkedIn Learning, yes, not around this specific topic, but I was curious, are you developing your own content for LinkedIn Learning or leveraging what's on that platform?
So we actually have not developed our own content at this point because we believe that there's so many great content providers out there that we don't need to compete or reinvent the wheel on that standpoint. Like I could tell you about emotional intelligence, or we can watch what Daniel Goleman has to say about it, emotional intelligence. Like, who has more relevance and more credibility here? Okay, let's find out what he has to say. So, we are actually going to some of the best leaders on certain topics, taking some of their content that LinkedIn has curated, and then we're curating these learning journeys in alignment with how we believe that people can build and learn some new skills. But what I can tell you is that just watching LinkedIn Learning on its own is almost inevitably not going to actually change some behaviors unless you have a really, really dedicated learner, which is probably not going to be the definition of most of us, including myself. Because the coach adds a whole new level of accountability in that process.
Yep, exactly. Times are changing really fast. You mentioned AI making its headway into your business. I'm curious what trends, maybe a couple of the top trends you're seeing in leadership development as times are changing so fast and maybe more at the executive level.
Yeah, I think one of the big things on AI is everyone at every level needs to get comfortable using it and understand different ways that it can be used. Because I think for a lot of people, especially mid management and up, the threat is not how is AI going to take away my job? The threat is actually who else is using AI in ways that I haven't thought of, and how are they going to actually be taking my job at some point in the future because they're going to be that much more efficient in their work and be able to get that much more done. So I think finding ways for leaders to use it in ethical ways. And then I think there's a really big question that I certainly don't have the answer to yet, but what is going to happen with entry level jobs? And how are we going to continue to develop talent in the future if more and more entry level jobs are being taken over by things like AI?
Sure.
And then it's just gonna be harder and harder to find good talent for the middle management and the executive level jobs because we're not going to be grooming people through the ranks of leadership. So I think we have some real systemic questions to be addressing going forward. And these are really complicated questions that we all need to be paying close attention to.
Yeah, another angle to this that I just heard a professor talking about this morning is they're seeing a dramatic decrease in, to use a poor way to phrase it, but essentially he was saying that the observable intelligence of folks in college is decreasing because they're all just using AI to generate the output. So they're not actually
Yeah.
learning. So, he's just talking about this decline in what he's observing out of students in college. And then, as a result, when they come out, what do they actually know when they have to go into the real world? Because they've just relied on AI to produce their work.
Yeah. Well, I even see that in my own kids as well, where, and maybe it's also just what kids do, but asking a question, and maybe they ask me or maybe they ask Siri, but rather than doing any sort of effort to figure out what the answer could be on their own. So again, maybe that's just a kid thing or a teenager thing, but we'll see how that evolves over time too.
Lauren, again, congratulations on all your success for your mother and what you've done with the business. It's quite a large business, and that type of success is pretty rare. So that's an amazing achievement. I usually try to summarize these discussions with a question that's basically, if there's one key takeaway that you would like folks to take from the conversation, what would you like that to be?
I would say focus on relationships. Number one, because that's how work gets done. You're going to go much farther, faster with a team because when you're trying to make it look like you're getting it all done all by yourself, then you're not recognizing your team, and your team is actually going to be how you're getting a lot of the work done as a leader. If you're growing within an organization, it's how you're going to get recognized. Corporate visibility is one of the things that we talk about a lot in our leadership development programs. It's not just who you know, but who knows you and how much do they recognize the value that you drive in the organization so that when it comes time for the promotions, the people who are in a position of influence are willing to put their name on the line to say, Nick is the one that I want to promote next. And of course, it also really matters when you're looking for a job. We know that through your network is how you're going to land in 80% of the cases. So 80% of jobs are not through just purely job boards, but through making sure you're connecting with the hiring manager, with executives at those organizations. And so don't leave your network just for when you need to use them in a job search or when you need a promotion. Make sure that you're just feeding your network constantly and that you're giving as well as getting, and don't be afraid to make the ask when you need.
Lauren, I think that's excellent advice. Relationships matter. They definitely do.
Yep, absolutely. I'm glad to build a new relationship with you, Nick.
Absolutely. It's one of the good things about doing this is getting to meet nice, smart folks like yourself. So I really appreciate the time and some of the insights you've provided here. Is there any, so if folks want to learn more about impact or yourself, is there any particular way you'd like folks to find you?
Yeah, sure. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Lauren Herring is my name, and I can make sure that you have that information. Feel free to reach out and connect. And then, of course, reach out on our website, www.impactgrouphr.com.
That's great, Lauren. I really appreciate the time today.
Thank you.